Ever since I can remember, I have always been afraid of white utility vans with blocked-out back windows. In 6th grade, I used to pick up my sister, who was in 1st grade, from school, and then walk to the restaurant our mom worked at to hang out for a while and eat dinner while she was on shift. One day as we were walking out of our apartment complex and approached the gate, one of those creepy vans pulled up and blocked off the gate. He was not trying to exit. He was purposely blocking our path. We slowed down, and then the driver hopped out of the car, walked around to the passenger side, opened his back door, and started coming towards us. I immediately freaked out, grabbed my sister's hand, and yelled, "Run!" We ran back to our apartment as the guy got back into his car and followed us. I locked us in the apartment, and my sister and I hid in our room and stayed really quiet. There was a knock at the door, and we both started crying. I called my mom, but since she was working, she didn't answer right away. Then I got the guts to look out the window in the living room, and sure enough, the white van was parked outside. Later on, I spoke to my mom, and she didn't really believe me. When she got home, there was a piece of paper stuck in the door. No writing or anything. It was just so strange. As a background, I grew up in the suburbs of Sacramento, California, in an area that was very middle class and a place where it always felt safe. As a kid, I would walk home from school with the neighbors. We would play hide-and-go-seek, basketball on the streets, etc., and we never had any strange encounters. I am currently a 30-year-old male, and it is weird to think about this story. During the weekends when I was a teenager, I would ride my bike for hours at a time and ride around a 10-block radius from where my house was. In Sacramento, we typically had good weather in the spring, and a lot of the days were mild temperature, with a decent amount of clear skies and sunlight. I'm a pretty introverted individual, and also pretty naive to things around me. I vividly remember one time when I was 13 years old and riding my bike in the neighborhood. I had a speedometer on my bike, and I always traveled around 12 to 16 miles per hour in the right-hand side bike lane of the street. While I was cruising on my bike, a windowless white van pulled up next to me on my left and matched my speed. I remember glancing over and thinking nothing of this since it is a neighborhood street and it would be weird if a van blazed by me at 35 miles per hour. Within a few seconds of the van matching my speed, the right side door slid open, and there were two guys in the back and one guy driving. I look over, and the van got uncomfortably close to me, and one of the guys said quite loudly, "Get in the van." I didn't reply, but started pedaling faster and reached about 18 miles per hour, which I know isn't very fast compared to a van, and isn't going to get away from the van, but it seemed like the right thing to do at the time. The van accelerated to match my speed, and I looked over at them. The van was weird on the inside. I remember seeing no seats in the back. The two guys were not seatbelted in. I remember seeing the metal flooring of the van and some rope. The guy beckoned, maybe in more of an insisting tone, to get inside his van. He reached out, since I was within arm's distance. At this time, we were traveling straight, but literally just as he was reaching out, the road we were on intersected with another street that I instinctively turned a hard right onto. They were forced to keep going straight, otherwise they would have flipped the van to follow me. I knew the area well, and started weaving in between the residential streets that consisted of lots of curved roads that looped and resembled a maze. In hindsight, it was scary to be in that area because they could have easily found me, as I couldn't have seen them coming up on me because of the curved roads. But luckily they didn't make another pass. Nowadays I look back and wonder what they had intended to do. Were they just goofing around? Were the ropes just for belaying and rock climbing, or did they actually have a malicious intent? Did they ever do anything to anyone else who couldn't get away? These questions still linger with me. I went home and never told anyone about it. To this day, only 2 people know about this, and now you. I'm from a country in Europe where crime is generally really rare. You can imagine that people aren't that afraid to walk around alone. However, I rarely go out by myself at night just because I'm from a small town and the surrounding woods creep me out. When with friends, however, I do enjoy the night strolls. So last week, me and my best friend went out on our usual walk. We know the roads really well. We walk the same path every time, and together we have a lot of fun, so we never think about scary things that could happen. The first 3/4 of our path is well lit by street lamps, and there are houses around. Not a lot of them, but they are there. Then we arrive at the tunnel from whereon there are no lights and the asphalt roads turn into a rocky pebble one. We come there and spot a white van standing in front of the tunnel, to the side of a ditch that runs there. It's not turned on and we are really creeped out by it, but we just joke about how someone's going to follow us. When we pass by, I mention that I think I see a silhouette of someone inside, but my friend gets angry at me for scaring her. After we cross the tunnel, the path turns left and you have to walk uphill. It's not a long or hard walk before you come on top of that hill and have to go down again. From that point on, you are surrounded by woods on one side, with an open hops field on the other. It's really dark, but we continue having a fun conversation for about 5 minutes or so, before the lights start shining from behind us. It's not weird for cars to pass there, as a lot of farms are like a mile or two ahead, so we move to the side and continue walking slow to let the car pass by. However, we look back again and realize it's not a car, but actually the white van from before. We kind of freak out, but hope it's going to pass. It doesn't. We keep walking slowly for another 50 to 100 meters and the van is slowly traveling behind us. When we speed up, we hear it rev up as well, and when we slow down, so does the vehicle. I bum my friend in the shoulder, look her straight in the eyes and say, "Run. The field to the left. Now." We both make a run for it as fast and far away as we can. We almost trip on the piles of soil because there's a lot of them in the hops fields. We finally jump down and hide behind one of the bumps on the ground and just wait. The van stops, turns on the strong headlights, and 2 men exit. They have hoods on, and they're each holding flashlights shining in our direction, scanning the field. I think a minute or two pass by before they enter the van, turn it around on the spot, and drive back from the direction we came. We've never been so freaked out, and we just ran home through the field. The houses start again right by the end of it, so we felt safe when we got there. I don't know who the people were, and I've never been followed like this before. I think we'll stay off that path for quite some time from now on. Last summer at approximately 3 a.m., I was returning home to my apartment in the sleeping district of Vilnius, Lithuania. Vilnius is a compact, neat town of about 500,000 people, and whatever nightlife there is, it happens only in the central district called the Old Town. Large suburbs full of Soviet concrete blocks can seem abandoned at night. My home is within a walking distance from the center, so for me it is completely normal to return home on foot, even at night. So I was walking down the completely empty street enjoying fresh nighttime air. Only occasionally I could see a car, almost always a taxi, and it was dead silence around. Then this white van appeared. I saw it quite far away, cruising at a slow speed in the first lane as if observing something. Then it steered into smaller lateral streets and stopped between 2 large blocks of flats some 50 meters from me. The van itself is old, beaten up and rusty. Similar ones are often used by small construction and relocation companies, only this one had no markings on it. The first door opened and out came a man in his 40s or 50s wearing non-specific clothes, jeans and some dark jacket. For several seconds he looked around cautiously, but I was too far away and in a non-illuminated area, so he either didn't notice or paid no attention to me. He ran around the van and stopped in front of a large old metal box that was fixed to the wall of a house nearby. You can see those boxes near all Soviet-area buildings, and I assume they contain distribution boards or some other electric equipment. As far as I know, those boxes are always locked. The van was blocking the box so that you couldn't see it from the street, but I was at a lucky angle and able to observe what happened. For a second or two, the man fiddled with the lock, opened the door, and took something out. Then he locked it and hastily ran back into the van. closing the rear door as the van was already moving. It slowly picked up speed and drove away. At this moment I remembered that it's not the first time I've seen this van. I actually saw it a lot at night, slowly driving around sleeping districts of Vilnius. I never paid attention to it, but still remembered it because there are very few cars at night. Strange, I thought. I told the story to several buddies, and we had a good laugh making up stories about secret drug distribution networks, spy messages, and stuff. I almost forgot it until last week. It was around 9:30 p.m. I was walking along the street separating the old town from the new town, right by the store belonging to large supermarket chains. There was a metal box on the wall. It was open, and a middle-aged man in builder uniform belonging to some construction company was squatting near it. When I noticed him, his hands were elbow-deep in the box. A woman of similar age wearing a uniform of the supermarket chain was standing nearby, looking at the man. There were a lot of people in the street, but at the time, I was the only one within listening distance of the two. Probably they were talking before I came near, and I could overhear the last words of the conversation. "So, they're coming to take it every night?" said the man. "Aga," the woman answered. It was Russian for "uh-huh." The question was in Lithuanian, but since Vilnius has large Russian minority, bilingual conversations are somewhat commonplace. The man closed the box and locked it with a small, cheap-looking lock. Then they noticed me. The woman glanced at me rather angrily, turned around and disappeared between the doors of the store. The man walked away in the other direction. There was no goodbye. It looked as if though I disturbed them and they did not want to be seen here. I honestly don't know what it's all about, but I had several ideas. The most realistic one is that there is some low-level illegal stuff going on, such as people paying local criminals for protection by leaving money inside specific electricity distribution boards while thugs come and pick it up at night. But I clearly remember Builderman saying every night, which seems strange. Maybe people are stealing something. Money, goods, from their own workplaces in metal boxes and shady vans or some underground distribution and exchange network. I don't know, but any ideas would be helpful. In 2013, I was 21 years old and studying abroad in South America with my college roommate. I had more than one unsettling encounter while down there, but I'm an experienced traveler and generally have good instincts, so I can't say I have any other thrilling stories aside from narrowly dodging a few muggings. Other than the general sense of unease that can come with being a solo female traveler, well, pair of solo female travelers, our 4-month stay was relatively unexciting. Relatively. At the end of our program, we decided to stay for some extra time and do some more casual backpacking. We ended up deciding to hike the Inca Trail. Amazing for anyone considering it. For the unfamiliar, you start in one location, which varies depending on the trek you choose. Then you end in a small town near Machu Picchu called Aguas Calientes. Your return trip is covered by your hiking company, unless you choose to stay, in which case you get a refund. Well, we were new in town and our company left immediately after lunch, and we wanted to spend the night and get the most out of being in that part of the country. The time came and we said farewell to 11 of our 12 hiking companions, and were joined by one other of our new friends who was planning on starting an additional hike in the morning. Our guides gave us our refund and gave us very careful instructions on how to get back to Cusco, the city we had originally departed from. When you're ready to leave, make your way to the train station right there. Don't go anywhere else. It's a very official and safe train. And once you get to the last stop, go to the official bus station and it'll bring you back to Cusco. We understood, thanked them, and parted ways. That night, we went out drinking with the remaining member of our hiking party. He didn't drink because of his grueling hike the next day, but we had a blast and felt safer for having a male with us. Overall, we made sure to keep our wits about us, and it turns out to be a very fun night without incident. We make our way back to the hostel, wish him well on his travels, and go to bed, ready to explore town the next day before catching the train home. We have our fun, then make our way to the train station. It's a very nice train, not unlike the ones I take in the US occasionally, maybe even nicer. It definitely felt very safe. The train pulls into the final station and we begin trying to locate the bus station. We ask a gentleman who clearly works at the stop, and he points and tells us to walk about a half mile that direction and we shouldn't be able to miss it. We thank him and continue. I want to pause here to emphasize all of these conversations and the one that follow are entirely in Spanish. This isn't important, but it's good for you to understand that I was speaking a language I was extremely proficient in, but not fluent. It's not too difficult for native speakers to talk quickly and avoid being understood. We walk for what actually does not seem like enough time, less than half a mile for sure, before coming across a bus station. I'm shocked, to say the least. I'm also reminding myself that I come from a much nicer part of the world and I need to put aside my preconceived notions. It has a sign clearly labeling it the bus station, and it says to Cusco right on the sign. To be clear, it's not a fake sign. It's similar to a sign marking a gas station from a freeway. Big thick pole, and the actual sign was probably 50 feet in the air. It could not have been a temporary trick, otherwise I would have been much more suspicious. Aside from that sign though, well, it was something all right. The buses were all the classic bad news white vans. You know the ones. Again, I check myself. How many people could possibly travel to Cusco in a day here? It wouldn't make sense to have a giant 20-plus seater bus doing the trek every day. There's a tiny wooden building, presumably an office, underneath the big sign, but we didn't need to go there, as there are two gentlemen standing outside near the vans. We asked them if they are the buses to Cusco, though we can clearly read on the sign that they are, and the men confirm. We ask how much the tickets cost and when they planned on departing. They give us the price and say 5 to 10 minutes, and then direct us to a van to sit and wait. We both sit down, and I'll admit, I was uneasy. Again, I'm an experienced traveler and do know not to expect modern luxuries in the less developed parts of the world, and there's nothing outwardly sinister about this bus stop, but it just wasn't what I was expecting, even for the area. My roommate does not seem to be sharing any of my trepidation, however. She's a bit more sheltered and generally trusting, so that's fairly in character for her. I'm also an over-worrier, so between us, we were probably both on the more extreme side of the appropriate emotion, me silently freaking out and her a little too relaxed. We wait for over 10 minutes in this van, which we've left the door open due to the heat. We were just talking and swatting flies which are buzzing in and out of the open door. I'm unsurprised we're not on schedule, as I know they are trying to avoid wasting a tank of gas on 2 passengers and are trying to wait for more people. But we have an hour's drive ahead of us and I want to get going, so I decide to go ask. They tell us 5 more minutes. Sure. More time passes and I can't shake the feeling we aren't at the right bus stop, though nobody made mention of there being more than one in a tiny town, so I kept telling myself I was being irrational. I decided to go see if anybody is in the office and just get more information. I open the door and walk in without much hesitation, given its positioning under the giant sign. Well, I walk into what is clearly a residence and 15 sweaty Peruvians cooking beans and looking as shocked to see me as I to see them. I stammer out, is this the bus station? They look confused and go, "Oh, the bus. Yes, the bus. Go outside. Talk to the men. Bus to Cusco." I back out and apologize for intruding. I go back to the van to report the experience to my roommate, right as another girl walks up and says, "Bus to Cusco?" She is clearly a native Spanish speaker and not a foreign tourist. The men immediately say yes and place her in a different van, which makes no sense if they are trying to fill one van to take us to the same place. This skews me out more than anything else that's happened yet. I pop my head in the van and tell my roommate to keep hanging tight. I walk over to the girl in the other van, where she is also waiting alone, and ask her if she's going to Cusco. She confirms this to be the case, and I explain we are going there as well, and I'm not sure why we would be in separate vans. She says she doesn't know, but looks generally unconcerned. I go back to our van and sit down. I go back and sit in the van, which my roommate has not left, and we've been there for probably near 30 to 40 minutes at this point. I start expressing my concerns to her, but she's being somewhat dismissive, which I can't blame her for, as I'm a generally anxious person and she's more used to that than anyone. We get pretty quiet and resign ourselves to waiting, still swatting flies and dabbing our brows with our shirts. I'm now sitting quietly with my mind going wild with possibilities, and extremely suspicious something is wrong, but also conceding there's nothing too concrete justifying my level of concern. At this point, I'm now picturing some ploy to abduct foreigners or being generally murdered. It's not a good feeling. The flies are driving me absolutely mad at this point, and now I've decided they were probably hovering around this car because somebody was murdered in there and the blood wasn't cleaned well enough to fool the flies. At this point, I'm just torturing myself. The train of thought continues and I look up. Hundreds of flies are swarmed and crawling on the roof of the van. I realized we hadn't noticed because only a few would be flying around at a time, and the van was rather spacious, and my roommate and I were close to the front while the mass grouping of them were closer to the back. I'm frozen in fear at this point, unsure if this is confirming my theory that somebody was murdered in the car or if I'm really letting my imagination run wild and there are less remarkable things than flies in a South American van. I'm basically hyperventilating. I wish I could emphasize how many flies were in there. I gesture upwards to my roommate, who looks up, then appears shocked. At this point, I can assume I'm shaking my head and muttering. Right as this happens, the other van with the native girl begins to pull away. I make a snap-second decision. I launch myself out of our van and start sprinting, and slam my hand on her van to bring it to a stop. She opens the door in shock, and I grab the door to hold it open and say more forcefully than I thought I had in me, "We're coming with you." I look back at my roommate, who is just staring, and I yell, "Grab our bags and run, now!" She knew better than to mess with me when I'm in crisis mode, and comes sprinting out of the other van with both backpacks in hand while I keep my hand on the door. The two men come running after, saying, "Don't go, we leave now, we leave for Cusco now," as I shove my friend into the car and scream, "Sorry, we were riding with our friend here," and slam the door closed. The native girl, looking unsettled, just tells the driver we are friends and to drive. At this point, I don't know that this driver isn't in on whatever I was afraid of, or if he was, but they didn't plan on messing with a local. Either way, I just saw her as our best bet. We pull out onto the road and drive for a few minutes when I see, you guessed it, the bus station. A very official, legitimate-looking bus station with actual buses, which was probably about half a mile from the train. I have no doubt that this is where we were supposed to go, and feel the blood drain from my face. I thought about jumping out of the van and running, but in a split second, I questioned if it wasn't for official tour groups or anything else I may not be considering, and my worst fear is ending up back at the first place without our new local friend. As we drive, I'm looking for street signs, landmarks, or anything to indicate we're actually headed to Cusco. All I see is wide-open desert plains and nothing else. I sat the rest of the drive frozen in fear, collecting a pile of makeshift weapons from what I could find in the back of the van. This included a sharp piece of car, likely from some previous collision, and a smallish fire extinguisher. I told myself if anybody tried to hurt us, I would kill them first and then figure out how to avoid a Peruvian prison second. I spent the entire car ride telling myself that I had it in me to kill a person if they tried to harm me. I grip my weapons until my knuckles turn white, when suddenly the van comes to a stop, very much in the middle of nowhere. The driver accepts a phone call, which I can't understand. He then gets off the phone and slowly tells us he just remembered he can't take us all the way to Cusco. The native girl looks concerned, which makes me even more paranoid, and he proceeds to point to a large but desolate building and tells us to go in there to find a ride the rest of the way. Looking back, I'm not sure how I avoided throwing up from anxiety and fear. The three of us journey in there, my weapons abandoned as I couldn't sneak them out of the van, and people just keep pointing us further and further back until we come to a back opening leading us outside. I wanted to run, to somehow undo this entire journey, but we really had no other choice than to stick with the native girl. We had no alternative methods of transportation. There's no civilization in sight, and honestly, I'm not even sure what part of the country we are in. All I know is that we are 60 to 90 minutes away from wherever the train stopped, hopefully in the direction of Cusco. We get to another van, this time with the opposite problem. They are insisting we fit 10-plus people into a 7-seater van. then try to take my backpack, saying it needs to go on the roof. That backpack had my passport and every resource I would most certainly want in an emergency. I'm thinking they can take it over my dead body, which might very well be happening, right as I see my roommate happily passing hers to the lady. I grab her arm tightly and ready to ask what on earth is wrong with her survival instincts, but my face must have said it all because she backs up and uncertainly tells the lady, never mind, she will be keeping her bag with her. The lady looks aggravated and says they won't fit in the car with all the people. I tell her we are happy to hold them as I climb in and demonstrate in a way that will require her to force either me or the bag out. She relents and my roommate crawls in. We sit in the back with our backpacks towering on our laps in front of us, my roommate looking somewhat inconvenienced. I've made her do this. Honestly, maybe I was overreacting, but better than underreacting. We drove a long while, and finally we enter the city borders of Cusco. On the one hand, I'm relieved because I now know exactly where we are. On the other hand, the surrounding areas outside of the main square are extremely dangerous shanty towns, and we are the only foreigners with giant backpacks on the bus. No sooner am I thinking, well, at least we are close, when the bus driver turns and says he doesn't want to drive any further, and we can figure our own way from there. Even the native girl immediately goes on red alert and offers to pay more if he will take us to the city square. He declines, kicks us out of the van, and drives away. We are looking at all the people staring openly at us, and she asks in a scared voice if we will split a cab with her. We agree immediately. Problem is, in this part of the world, a cab is often the first car to drive up and assures you they will take you where you are going. Not very official. And this is exactly what happens. A Corolla from, I'm sure, 1993 pulls up and tells us to hop in. Our friend looks wary, but decides it's better than winging it out in the open. He drops us in the town square without incident, and at this point, the native girl looks like she's aged 5 years since we first crossed paths with her hours ago. I'm sure I looked even worse. She meekly says, "Well, I'm glad we got here safely." I can barely talk, I'm so exhausted, and respond, "Me too, thanks." We part ways. I had a few incidents on this trip that made me a believer that no matter where you are, one traumatic experience makes wherever the last place you slept feel like home. Let me tell you, the hostel bed felt amazing. This happened to me when I was in high school. My family was going through some tough times, and my mom and I would get into fights about money and social life. I felt I was doing more than enough for my age at that time, 16, going to school, working, giving her my paycheck for bills, and I was upset I wasn't allowed to go out on whatever little time off I did have. On her side, she felt that me going out would distract me from school, work, and I would pick up vices. One night, I got home from work, and after a particularly heated argument, I couldn't take it anymore and just left the house. I didn't have a plan as to what I was going to do. In my mind, I just wanted to get away from my responsibilities, so I just started walking with no specific destination. I ended up walking for 2 hours. Despite walking for so long, though, I was only about 15 minutes from home because I was going in circles. By that time, it was 1 a.m., and I was walking on a sidewalk when a van pulled up in front of me and stopped on the side of the road. Now, this was on a populated area, on a 3-lane road just near the expressway, and there was mild traffic, so I didn't give it much thought. As I got closer to the van, though, I see that the driver rolls down the passenger side window and is looking at me through the side mirror. Still, I didn't think anything of it. Maybe somebody was lost trying to get directions. Now I'm right by the passenger door, and the man calls me over. He said he was lost and was trying to get directions to the expressway. This is when I started feeling this wasn't right. The signs for the expressway were all around, and the expressway was literally 2 blocks away. My mind started racing. I literally pointed at the expressway, which was within sight, and started to walk away when he started following me and asked me where I was going and if I needed a ride. At this point, I'm regretting not having gone home already. I turn towards the man and tell him that I don't need a ride, but thanks for offering, and start walking away faster. The man doesn't say anything and starts driving away, but as he passes me, I can see that he was looking at me through the side mirror again. Seeing him drive away, I started feeling relieved, but then instead of him going straight towards the expressway, he takes a right turn and goes down the street. Now I'm freaking out. I start thinking that I might go all the way around the block just to get back on the main road and come engage me again. So as soon as I see his van go out of sight, I book it to the building that was to my right and hide behind some bushes. The building had a bunch of offices, and I could see there was a lawyer's office, dentist's office, and other small businesses. I lay down on the ground and just waited. A couple of minutes passed, and through a small gap in the bushes, I see his van rolling up towards the main road. The man had done as I thought. He went around the block just to get back on the main road. I saw him driving slowly as he was looking for me, and then I saw him take that right turn again. I knew for sure he was looking for me again. Now, after a few minutes, his van shows up again, but it is driving slower and comes to a stop in front of the office building. After a few tense seconds in which I thought he would get out of the vehicle to check the area, he started to drive away. The whole time I was hiding behind the bushes, I was freaking out, knowing a stranger was actively searching for me. I waited about 5 minutes after I saw his vehicle drive off, and I took off running home. To this day, I don't know what his intentions might have been, but I believe in intuition, and mine told me that his motives were sinister. So let's rewind back to maybe 2006 or 2007. I was about 9 or 10 years old. My friend and I had just gotten done swimming at my grandfather's house, which was only a few blocks from my friend's house. We live in a small community, and lots of my family and friends live very close by. We were walking down the street, heading back to my friend's house, when a big brown van comes up beside us at a stop sign. He rolls his window down, and he had dark eyes, long hair, and a beard. If I ever saw this dude again, I'd know who he was for sure. So he stops and asks us for directions to a local store, and I start going on about it, and he's just staring at me. Mind you, we're both in bathing suits and wrapped in towels. After I give him the directions, he tries to talk to us more, and I start to feel uncomfortable by the way he was talking. I was the older one of the both of us, so I grab my friend by the hand and say goodbye and start walking away. So this is when he turns and goes the complete opposite direction of the store and straight for us, at full speed. The most terrifying part of this was how fast he was driving. It wasn't a city area, it was a small suburb where the speed limit is 20 miles per hour. He was probably going at least 45 or 50 miles per hour just to catch up to us. It wasn't subtle at all. We start running, taking shortcuts and back alleys to get to our house, roads he can't drive down. We come to this dead-end road, and he's still behind us. A lady who had just returned home from a jog stops us and grabs both of us by the shoulders and kisses our foreheads. We were seriously confused because we didn't really know her, but she just says, "Girls, I'm so glad you're home, let's get dinner," or something like that. She was way too young to be our mother or anything, but the van stops, backs out of the street, and speeds off. Once he's gone, the lady looks at us and says, "He tried to pick me up a couple of days ago. Stay away from that van, and let me walk you home." So she walked us home, and for some reason neither of us ever said anything to our parents about it, or at least I don't remember saying anything. I never saw that van again, and I never saw him again. And mind you, it is a small town, so you see the same people all the time. I'd even seen the lady who rescued us before, but she had never spoken to us before that day, and I'm so glad she did. I still live in the same town, in my house with my roommate, and I still think about that freak every time I go down the road he stopped us at. I don't want to have to be the jogger saving 2 girls one summer. Maybe this is a good reason to start jogging. Be the local neighborhood watch. I've tried to look him up and all, to see if someone with that van was arrested in my area around that time. It would be nice to know if they ever caught that creep. The story happened in the UK. While the town itself wasn't big, it had disproportionately large crime rates, to the point where people from surrounding towns will automatically assume you're hard and treat you like a gangster. Not to say that I dislike the town, but it's a pretty rough place, even when we lived in one of the nicer neighborhoods. I was around 11 at the time. Since I was in year 6, I was finally allowed to leave school without a parent to collect me, so I would take my 6-year-old brother with me. The walk home was short, so there wasn't much variation in routine. The final part of it was between 2 estates, the druggy estate and the safest estate, which were separated by a neglected wooded area. This, of course, attracted more creeps the deeper you went, but that's a whole other story. To get home, we had to go up a hefty incline next to these woods. Our path was on a minor road, and the other side was lined with houses and a few dead streets before we got to the top of the hill to finally cross the road and turn onto our dead-end street. The only excuse I have for why we walked on the woods side was because there was lots of blackberry bushes and dog walkers, so we got to eat before dinner and pet a lot of dogs. This time, there were no dogs. The second we got onto the path next to the woods, my sixth sense went haywire. It's strange how you can just tell something is watching you. I was too scared to turn around and look, thinking that I was just being weird, but the feeling persisted. When I looked back, there it was, the vehicle of legends, an unmarked white van. Honestly, I wouldn't have paid much mind to it if it hadn't been acting so strangely. It's not like the hill had a 90-degree angle of steepness, but it was still steep, lasted a long distance, and sure, it's normal to be careful on the road. But this van took it to the extreme. It drove so slowly, inching up the road in a way that only confused me. But hey, I'm just a kid. What do I know about cars and driving? So we kept walking, but I looked at it every so often, subtly as I could. The real alarm bells came when it stopped just as we were nearing our turn. I now realized that it could probably tell we were going to cross there by the way we changed sides of the sidewalk and wanted to see which street we would go down, since there were 3 in the vicinity. I am only thankful that this happened when my brother didn't have problems with authority yet. I gave him a little talk that he needs to listen to what I say and be prepared for anything I tell him, while trying to keep the mood light and promise to tell him everything afterwards. Of course, the van followed us, closing in. Now, our street is a dead end that branches out in 2 directions, with a little hill lined by houses in between the 2 branches. One of these houses was ours, and if these idiots saw where we lived, I was scared that we would be hounded. I still had a clear memory of when our car was set on fire before, and of almost being kidnapped when I was 8, so I didn't want to be responsible for any misfortune. Behind the hill houses were garages, so I dragged my brother and we ran. I heard the roar of an engine behind us. A metal fence ran in the middle of the garage section so the van couldn't follow us. Before I could see if they got out and decided to give chase, we ran down out of sight and around the bend through a little alleyway. We wandered around a little bit once we found an area with people before heading home. The van wasn't there anymore, but my paranoia was. My girlfriend and I go camping in the Scottish Highlands. It's super chilled. People still hitchhike without fearing for their safety. Locals will offer you a ride. Everyone talks to everyone. We frequent a particular campsite in the middle of a beautiful mountain range that's very safe and friendly. We were there one April night, so the campsite was really quiet due to the fact that it was about 4 degrees. We got set up and lit a campfire. We were fairly near the toilet block since the site was empty. So before long, 2 guys walked past and said hello. On the way back, they stopped for a while longer. They said they were staying in a van, and did we want to join them for a drink inside since it was so cold out? My girlfriend, ever the social butterfly, said sure and started to get up. The guys were giving me serious creep vibes, but I tend to err on the side of hating everyone, so I figured I didn't want to be a party pooper and went along to their van. It was a large white transit van, and actually really nice inside. There was plenty of room for all of us to sit inside, but I kind of hovered in the doorway. The van belonged to the older guy of the 2, maybe mid-40s, who seemed pretty genuine. He told us he lived in the van most of the time, but brought his friend from work to the Highlands for the weekend because he'd never been before. His friend was a younger guy, maybe mid-20s, chatty to the point of being irritating because he was drunk. Before long, the conversation turned to one that will be familiar to any woman in a same-sex relationship. Are you guys sisters? No, we're together. Well, dang, don't you miss love of a man, you know? Can I watch? Etc., etc. At this point, we'd been there maybe half an hour, and it was really pitch black outside, so we decided to call it a night. It was all very pleasant when we left, although the younger guy had got pretty quiet when we said we were leaving. About 15 minutes after we got into our tiny pop-up tent, we hear a younger guy saying, "Girls, let me in." My girl says, "No, go away," in a very assertive voice. She's from Glasgow and doesn't mess around. We thought he'd gone until a few minutes later we hear someone fumbling around with the zip on our tent. I was terrified and froze, but my girlfriend grabbed the zip, which was right above our heads. She stopped him from pulling it up any further. He whispered, "We showed you a good time, now it's for you to show me a good time." My girlfriend told him to F off and loudly shouted some extra insults at him in case anyone could hear, but I'm not sure there was anyone but us and the van men for miles. He kept fumbling around with the zip for another few minutes and then went away. We were terrified for the rest of the night, and my girlfriend kept her hand on the zip just in case. We packed up and ran at first light. We'd left the car unlocked because it's usually such a safe campsite and we're always in and out of the car for supplies. I brought an extra hoodie just in case and I put it on as we left. A few hours later, I put my hand in the pocket and found a used condom. A creepy retrobate had used a condom on himself and tucked it into my pocket for me to find later. The thought of him sitting in our car filling that condom gives me the heave. A few years later at the same campsite, we bumped into the older guy. He smiled at us apologetically and walked away without any of us saying a word. This occurred about 7 years ago when I was 19. My best friend at the time and I, after a lot of saving, went on a trip to London and Paris by ourselves. The trip was overall amazing, except for one night. We decided to go to a nightclub on Piccadilly Circus. We took a bus down by this area and chose our destination. While in the club, some men took interest in us and invited us back to their place. I got weird vibes from them. I also had a boyfriend at the time, so I decided I didn't want to go. My friend, however, was very stubborn on going, so after pleading with her for a bit, I gave up and decided to go back to the hotel by myself. I tried to take a bus, but it didn't work out, and not knowing how to find a taxi by myself, I decided to walk back. It was 2 to 3 a.m. in the morning, but after having a few drinks, I felt courageous enough to find my way. I had a map on me, but no phone. The walk wasn't so bad, except along the way a man tried to invite me into the basement of a building he was caring for. I promptly booked it down the street. It wasn't until it was 5 a.m., yes, it took me 2 or 3 hours to find my way back, that I ran into real trouble. It was starting to get bright out, thankfully, but I noticed a van following closely near behind me. He eventually yelled out asking if I needed a ride, and I said no thanks, I'm good. He was very persistent that I get in, so I took off running around a corner and hid behind a large bush. I was able to peep my head out and saw the van slowly going down the street looking for me. Of course, he was blocking the way I needed to go back to the hotel. I was only a 2-minute run away, so I waited about 15 minutes, took a peek and noticed he was gone. I gathered my courage and ran like the dickens back to the hotel. In the end, my friend was okay. She spent the night at the guy's house, and we both felt foolish for our choices and cried at the reunion. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r Let's Read Official, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon. Back from the community.